And welcome to the Winton Motor Raceway for the running of the Yokohama Winton 300. Cars forming up on the grid, and we have Mark Gibbs and Michael Preston in the Commodore Turbo, having set fastest time in qualifying yesterday, taking pole position today. Beside them on the front row of the grid, John Burke and Drew Price in the only Toyota Supra here in the race today. A field of 36 cars, one only Toyota Supra, which has been getting quicker and quicker all week on the front row of the grid. Two Starions make up the second row of the grid. 1985 winner Peter Fitzgerald, he'll be co-driven with Alan Grice in a Starion, the Yokohama Starion. Then we have Kevin Bartlett and Peter Mackay making up the second row of the grid. Position 5 is yet another Starion, the Ian Luff Terry Cracksman car. Beside them on the third row of the grid, Terry Scott and Wayne Park. Then we go back to the fourth row of the grid, Des Gibbs and Dennis O'Brien in yet another Starion, with Phil Brock and Peter Brock in the second of the Commodores, the first of the V8 Commodores. Peter Brock in his last Commodore, his last Holden race for the season or forever. The flag is up and they're away in the Yokohama Winton 300. Mark Gibbs from the inside at pole position takes it very nicely into the first corner in his Commodore Turbo. Followed through the line by the Toyota Supra driven by John Burke, with Peter Fitzgerald making up position 3 as they head up into the sweeper. A huge field of 36 cars in the Winton 300 for 1987.
Has moved up now to 5th place behind the 4th place Starion on Kilbar.
Peter Brock starting position 8 on the grid, up into 4th or 5th already, but he's going to have a battle in the V8 Commodore to outrun the Turbo Commodore that was on pole position and is currently leading. Driven by Mark Gibbs, that's the car heading into the big field onto the Dunlop Main Straight for the first time. Opening up a gap of 2 or 3 car lengths on the Toyota Supra of John Burke. Peter Fitzgerald, who's done exceptionally well in this Group E touring car category, is just sitting back there in 3rd place. He's got a very experienced driver in Alan Grice that will be taking over the wheel at around about the halfway mark. Kevin Bartlett having a bit of a look for 3rd place. Bartlett back in 4th, not able to get through on Fitzgerald. Traffic was just a little bit too crowded, and there's our race leader coming up towards the Michael Nissan sweeper for the second time, opening up the gap on the Toyota Supra. And there's Peter Brock in 05 in his last Holden race. He started racing 20 years ago here at the Winton Circuit in a Holden-powered Austin A30. And here today, 20 years later, his last race for Holden, of course, Brock going to BMW in season 88. Wouldn't believe so. So Brock, very relaxed pre-race, on position 8 on the grid, and working his way up through the field. There you can see the gap between 1st and 2nd, with Fitzgerald in 3rd place in the black and red Yokohama Starion. And here comes Brock into 4th place, passing Kevin Bartlett in car number 9. Brock up into 4th, Bartlett trying to get the 4th place back. They're side by side, but Bartlett is forced wide. These two old protagonists have been racing side by side for 20 years, Kevin Bartlett and Peter Brock. But it's Brock up into 4th place.
Well, Mark Gibbs has cleared out to a lead of 1.9 seconds in front of the John Burke Toyota in 2nd place. Of course, he needs this extra gap because Commodores will have to make 2 stops at least, maybe 3 some of them, whereas the Supra and the Starion are all planning to make 1 stop only.
So 50 laps at 300 kilometres. As Nigel says, at least 2 stops, maybe 3 stops. There's 1 or 2 cars that are suggesting they may get through with only 1 pit stop. It's not like the big high-powered stops that we see in some of the international events. It's all mechanical jacks and mechanical wheel races, manual wheel races, as we'll see in the pit stops. There's Peter Brock up into 4th place from position 8 on the grid, our race leader. Car number 11, the Commodore Turbo, driven by Mark Gibbs. Not opening up much more of the gap, as we can now see there's the 2nd place, car number 77, and there's 5th place, Kevin Bartlett, relegated back to 5th when he was passed just on the last lap by Peter Brock. Bartlett in the Starion, Mitsubishi Rally Art car. back to the race leader. Heading up towards the Mike Lynn Nissan sweeper, and the gap seems to be diminishing.
It has. That time across the line it was down to 1.5 seconds, so they are catching him slightly. Of course, the problem is, even with road tyres, that if you start off very quickly and overheat them, you can start to lose some grip. So maybe Mark Gibson, his desire to get away from the field and build up the speed he needs for his extra pit stop, has just done his tyres slightly to take a phrase from James Hunt, and I'll see if I can see a little mark on his tyres next time he goes past.
Brock in fourth position. Coming up on Peter Fitzgerald. Moving up as they come down the main Dunlop straight. Brock not making a great deal of impression, and certainly won't be throwing out a passing manoeuvre this time round. He comes a lot closer to Peter Fitzgerald as they come towards the end of the main straight. There's Brock in fourth place, just behind Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald, the Group B champion, and there goes Brock. There goes Fitzgerald, side by side.
So I think there's sometime this lap Brock will certainly try. He's very quick through the sweeper, so I'd imagine he'll try and get the inside line into the sweeper and maybe come out and take Fitzgerald on the way down to Penrite Corner at the bottom of the circuit.
Coming up to that position now, but Brock decides to just sit behind Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald seems a little bit quicker around the sweeper this time. Brock is not able to make any impression. That's John Burke in 77 lying in second place, and the gap between second and first continues to diminish. Mark Gibbs in the Turbo Commodore out in the lead. But the gap diminishing from 1.9 to 1.5 seconds. There you can see the gap. There's Fitzgerald, there's Brock. Down the main Dunlop straight they come once again.
Brock has certainly got the initial acceleration down the straight, but it's not quite long enough for it to, he's better make use of that. By the time he's got the thing really wound up, he's onto the brakes.
Peter Fitzgerald lying in third place. Brock just behind him in fourth. Brock closes up in the short start-finish straight, still not able to get past Peter Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald won the inaugural Winton 300 2 years ago. Didn't quite get there. And, now, the man wearing number 1 because he won the Group B championship in 1987, Peter Fitzgerald, right on the tail of the Toyota Supra. As they head to the top end of the circuit, Fitzgerald goes wide. John Burke takes the inside line. You can see the result that Burke ends up wide and Fitzgerald tight in on the corner.
Yes, Fitz certainly wants to take second place away from John Burke to rid himself of the challenge of Brock behind him.
Smoke off the tyre of brake lock up from our race leader Mark Gibbs in that previous corner. Let's hope those tyres are not going off. The gap looks to be about the same as they come down the main straight once again into the braking area at Ollie's Trolleys corner. Oh, that could be a telltale. The rear end of the Commodore went very, very wide through the S's that time. Keep an eye on, and the gap somewhat diminished.
It's down to 1.3 seconds.
Brock still having a go for third position. Another brake lock up, this time from John Burke, the Toyota Supra in second place, but that's our race leader. Mark Gibbs. You can see that gap has diminished because he was very untidy the last time through the S's. John Burke, followed by Peter Fitzgerald, followed by Peter Brock. Our first car to go into the pits, Mark Morgan-Jones and Mel Rose in car number 15. Mark Morgan-Jones, the early driver. Obviously their Commodore is having problems. It looks like a seat adjustment problem. They're playing around with the seat belt, whether they're just trying to get the driver out or not. So there's certainly a problem there. And after 6 laps of 150,
yes, it certainly was there a situation where he had the seat belts weren't properly done up, so he was obviously moving about in the car.
Brock having another go at Peter Fitzgerald there, still not able to get past and has to be satisfied with fourth place as they cross the line with 7 laps completed. It's still Mark Gibbs in the Commodore Turbo from John Burke, car number 77, the Supra. Third and fourth, as we see now. And back to our race leader. Won't like that, and I'm sure he'll be throwing out a challenge. to once again get 4th place.
Actually, I would say that Kevin had a great big grin on his face when he took Rocky just before. He'd have enjoyed that very much indeed.
Back to our race leader, and you can see the diminished gap down to about 40 or 50 metres as they head into the sweeper once again. There's John Burke, there's Peter Fitzgerald, there's Peter Brock, and there's the man that was in 4th, relegated back to 5th by Rocky, Kevin Bartlett. There's nothing in it between these first 5 cars. Quite a big gap back to the Yulden car. There's the battle between Bartlett and Brock. Brock, 20 years down the line, motor racing, and I'm sure Kevin Bartlett's been around for every one of those years.
And more.
And back to our leader, the gap diminishing. There's John Burke in the Toyota Supra coming up with Peter Fitzgerald, Peter Brock and Kevin Bartlett. That's Burke in 2nd, followed by Fitzgerald closing dramatically under brakes at the end of the main straight. Our race leader, Mark Gibbs, is throwing the car from side to side through the S's, knowing that he's got any one of 4 drivers hot on his heels and ready to overtake him. Kevin Bartlett in 5th place.
I'm sure we'll find this lap, so next lap or so, that the John Burke was throwing a real challenge to Mark Gibbs. He's getting very close, and if he doesn't throw a challenge out shortly, then Fitzgerald will, because he's right behind Burke. Because he took him under brakes there relatively easily.
Certainly throwing the car around with Gay abandoned, and they crossed the line.
And Fitzgerald's looking for a place past him now as well. Yes, Gibbs is in trouble, I'm sure of it.
Completion of 10 laps, and we have a new race leader, the Toyota Supra of John Burke. Keep an eye on Peter Fitzgerald, still in 3rd place, now out challenging our previous race leader, Mark Gibbs.
The problem all these 4 drivers face is that if they make a charge at somebody else in front of them, they leave themselves open for a charge from behind. So they're all going to try and protect their rears while they're going for a place in front. And that's what
throwing out a challenge now on a brake-locking Mark Gibbs as they went around the top end of the circuit. Gibbs locking brakes badly, with Fitzgerald hot on his heels. That's our new race leader, John Burke in the Toyota Supra. Gibbs still close to him, but I don't think he'll be able to get past. He's throwing out a challenge as they come down the main straight. It's Gibbs on the inside of Burke, and Gibbs takes the lead back. Gibbs back in the lead in car number 11. He certainly has the grunt down the main straight, but the braking area and the twisty parts of the circuit here through the S's, John Burke is able to stick right on his heels.
Brock's up to 3rd place behind him.
There's Brock into 3rd place. He's got past Peter Fitzgerald.
Burke went sideways then.
Brock on the inside of John Burke, and Brock is through to 2nd, and Peter Fitzgerald is trying to get through to 3rd. They're side by side as they go around this small Yokohama straight.
Here comes KB.
KB having a challenge as well. Side by side, the 2 stallions of Peter Fitzgerald and Kevin Bartlett. Oh, and Peter Fitzgerald decides to take the quick way around the corner and cut the corner onto the grass, into the dust, and falls on to his 4th place.
Well, after all that, we now have Mark Gibbs back in front, with now Peter Brock in 2nd place. In 3rd place is still John Burke. 4th place we have Peter Fitzgerald, and 5th place Kevin Bartlett.
They're coming down the main straight, and here's our race leader. He was pushed away from that position only momentarily by the Toyota Supra, but now it's Commodore Turbo versus Commodore V8. The Turbo of Mark Gibbs in the lead, just marginally from Peter Brock. Brock right up on the tail as car 64, it looks like, has gone into the pits. That's the Dennis O'Brien, there's Gibbs' car. And coming up on one of the slower cars now, Mark Gibbs in the lead. Brocky locking up a brake only momentarily. And there's John Burke looking for his 2nd place back. So it's Mark Gibbs coming under pressure from Brock. Brock coming under pressure from John Burke. Down the straight they come once again. 05, Peter Brock in 2nd place.
They're starting to come up to back markers, so the traffic is going to influence this race over the next 3 laps.
Most certainly will, because our race leader, Mark Gibbs, has got one of the slower cars. It's not one of the slower cars, it's Mark Morgan Jones that had a pit stop and still going reasonably slow. Gibbs has got to get past him, then Brock, then Burke, then Fitzgerald, and then Bartlett. Coming up on Morgan Jones now into the sweeper. Can Gibbs get past? Not on the sweeper, but he'll certainly be trying as they head up towards Benright Corner. Takes the inside of the track. Jenna Fitzgerald, and it went right on the inside, off the track, into the dust, and gets past Mark Morgan Jones. This will give him a little bit of a buffer because Brock has not yet got past. There he is on the outside of Morgan Jones. Comes on the inside from Castrol Corner and is able to sneak through. But have a look how close the Toyota Supra of John Burke is, right on the heels of Peter Brock. Down onto the main straight once again. It's still Mark Gibbs from Brock with the Toyota Supra of John Burke, then Peter Fitzgerald and Kevin Bartlett. And 15's gone. Mark Morgan Jones, who was right in the middle of our race leaders, has had an off in the S's and is certainly out of the way of the rest of the field now.
I'm not sure that was completely on his own, that leader, where Wade Fitzgerald was so close to him.
May have just had a little bit of a touch from one of the other cars, but certainly he's out of the way. And our first four in Mark Gibbs, you can see in the lead there from Peter Brock, from John Burke, from Peter Fitzgerald, and Kevin Bartlett in 5th place. That's Fitzgerald in 4th at the moment.
There's 3 back markers not far in front of them now, which they will catch around the sweeper and probably in Penrite, which will really affect the leadership battle at the moment.
So they're coming up on Bob Nelson's Toyota Celica. There's our 3rd place man, John Burke, started from pole position, and in 3rd place, quite a way back from Peter Brock, probably about 40 or 50 metres behind Brock in 2nd place. John Burke, the Toyota Supra, running for Brian Hilton Toyota, Toyo tyres. His car has been at the Winton circuit most of the week, and reports that we've heard daily has been getting faster and faster. This car 49, the Toyota Celica, the only Celica in the race, which our race leaders are coming up behind. And, coming up past quite a number of them. The Lithgow Car Club entry of Stephen Evans. 71 goes a little bit wide. That's the John White Suzuki GTI. We've got half a dozen of these little Suzuki GTIs in the race. There's our race leader, Mark Gibbs. Light shining, Brock going through in 2nd place. That gap opens out a little bit, then diminishes. Brock is trying everything he can because I'm sure he'd like to be in the lead before about halfway through the race he hands the car over to brother Philip. There's the gap between 1st and 2nd. There's the gap between 2nd and 3rd, Peter Brock and John Burke in the Toyota Supra. But I wouldn't say that it's unnecessarily upsetting the Brock Commodore, because there it is, sitting in 2nd place behind the Turbo Commodore of Mark Gibbs.
Of course, it's a very long race today, 150 laps, and we'll be seeing an enormous amount of lappery going on, and this will affect the outcome of the race to a great degree. Already we've seen some quite bad driving on behalf of some of the slower cars when the leaders are not behind them. Perhaps it's the first time past they didn't know they were coming. But I think that if the driving standard stays as it's been so far, we'll see some very close encounters between leaders coming through and some of the slower cars as the race progresses.
That's our race leader coming down into Ollie's Restaurants corner, into the S's, and will be coming around to complete 18 of 150 laps. 3rd place man, John Burke. Onto the straight, having completed 19 laps. Fitzgerald not able to show any real impression, but just able to hold the gap, about 1 car length between Burke and himself, car number 1. Fitzgerald going wide into the sweeper. As you can see, that corner just continues on and on and on. It almost comes back on itself, and then into a right-hander, a very short straight, and a tight right-hander at Penrite, the top end of the circuit. Have a look how close Fitzgerald gets now. It's Burke holding on to his 3rd place. There's certainly no way past there for Fitzgerald. As our leaders come on to the main straight, Mark Gibbs, Toyota Commodore, Peter Brock in 2nd place, V8 Commodore. Brock again closing up under brakes, locking a brake there. A bit of puff of smoke off the front wheel. The S's, the other view of the S's, and on up a little hill and onto the pit straight, crossing the start-finish line, completing 20 of 150 laps in the 1987 Yokohama Winton 300.
This will be a very fraught lap for Mark Gibbs. There's about 5 cars in front of him. And as we saw from practice times, Nobody's a really slow car, which is one of the problems. If it was particularly slow, we've no problem getting past them. But as they're only fractionally slow, it's hard to find a space where you can overtake. And that's what you saw there with Mark Gibbs trying to find a way around. Again, it was car 69, the Lithgow District Car Club Commodore of Greg Zinn.
It's Brock in the second place. He too will be coming up behind some of these slower cars. There he is, Mark Gibbs being momentarily balked by one of the slower cars. That's Hugh Grieve, a V8 Commodore.
Having trouble. Here comes Brock now. Brock's got him.
Brock's come up on the inside and Brock will fly through into the lead. Mark Gibbs momentarily balked by Hugh Grieve in the V8 Commodore, allowing Peter Brock to take the lead ahead of Mark Gibbs.
Lap 21, Peter Brock is in front for the first time.
Along the start-finish straight now, it's Brock's turn with 2 Suzukis in the InXS car, David Jones and Andrew McKay's car, immediately in front of Brock.
And just behind them, or slightly further back, Fitzgerald's got through the 3rd place in front of Burke in a similar type of situation where Burke got slightly balked by the slower car.
Brock deciding on the outside running around one of the Suzukis was successfully passed, as was Mark Gibbs. So Peter Brock, our new race leader, on the 21st lap. Still some slower cars to contend with. Commodore and a Suzuki side by side. There's nowhere through there for Brock. And our previous race leader within millimetres of Brock's rear bumper bar. The Suzuki driver shows Brock the way through, in between the two of them. He goes through, and this allows Brock to open up the gap between he and Gibbs. But Gibbs comes down, locking up a brake at the end of the main straight, so Gibbs is also through. Let's see if Brock can hold that advantage of about 1.5 seconds between he and Gibbs as he crosses the start-finish line, completing 22 of 150 laps. Brock would have about 50 metres on Mark Gibbs. Peter Fitzgerald's in 3rd place. He's got 2 cars in between he and Gibbs.
But he's taken advantage of the situation and in fact gained on Gibbs and left John Burke behind. And poor old KB has really come out proper in the whole thing because he's dropped low back from a lot of them. In fact, he's not that far in front of now our 6th place car, 57, the Commodore of Kent Wilder.
That's Brock with about 50 metres on Mark Gibbs, taking up the lead in amongst traffic. Perhaps a little bit more experience showing, able to weave his way through the traffic and just take advantage momentarily and grab the lead from Mark Gibbs. Brock down the main straight to the braking area of Hollis Restaurants corner.
And Fitzgerald's very close to the back of Gibbs now, rather.
There's the 2, Fitzgerald, and in 3rd place, hounding Mark Gibbs in the Turbo Commodore, nose to tail as they come down the pit straight. And Fitzgerald looking for an inside running at Auto Action corner. Can Fitzgerald take 2nd place? Fitzgerald and Gibbs side by side in Coca-Cola Straight. And there's a right-hander coming up with Fitzgerald having the advantage. Fitzgerald through to 2nd place and about 50 metres behind our race leader Peter Brock. So Mark Gibbs, in a matter of 2.5 laps, relegated from the lead back to 3rd place. That's Gibbs, that's Fitzgerald in 2nd now. Very nice manoeuvre on the inside, down the pit straight and through into 2nd. Our race leader Peter Brock. Now opening up a gap, a very handy gap between he and Fitzgerald. About 40 or 50 metres, but it seems to be increasing as they continue on. Let's have a look at it down the main straight. There they are, 1st, 2nd and 3rd. Brock, Fitzgerald and Mark Gibbs. Brock comes into the braking area. No lockups this time round, but you can see see he's very busy in the office. The wheel going backwards and forwards. Very smooth, he always has been, and Brock in an interview prior to the race was saying that it all started here in a Holden-powered Austin A30. The 27th of November 1967 was his first race here at Winton Raceway. Philip Brock, younger brother, who'll be taking over the drive of the car at around the halfway mark.
Phil, you have to say younger, not smaller.
Brock, as we were saying, started his career here 20 years ago, and an historic day because it will be his last race in a Commodore, in a Holden car, before he changes over to BMW in season 88. Brock. Very smooth around the sweeper. There's second place, Peter Fitzgerald. Third place is Mark Gibbs. Fourth, the Toyota Supra of John Burke has moved up quite considerably, and the four of them are coming together once again. Wouldn't really believe that it's a 150-lap, 300-kilometre long distance race at the pace that these cars are setting the early laps. There's Brock, followed by the Yokohama Mitsubishi of Peter Fitzgerald, and there's third place man Mark Gibbs. There's the difference between first and second once again. Peter Brock smoothly coming up onto some of the slower cars. It looks like another one of the 6 Suzuki GTIs that we have here today. Onto the main straight, a nice easy place to get past and dispense with one of the back markers. There's Fitzgerald, the Yokohama Starion. Second place. Will he get balked? Brock has managed to put one of the Suzukis between he and Fitzgerald. Brock also has one of the slower cars. There's Suzuki that Brock has just passed, and now he's got the Mazda Ian Green in his sights. Very famous number for Peter Brock, racing that number for many, many years now. There's Fitzgerald going through some of the slower cars. Yeah, not all that much, probably open out to about 50 or 60 metres between Brock and Vin Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald, of course, as we've mentioned, won the inaugural Yokohama Winton 300 2 years ago, wearing number 1 because he's the Australian champion in this category of racing for 1987. Back to Brock. There's the gap between first and second. Open up a little bit this time down the main straight. As Brock comes through the S's and will come around to complete lap 27 across the STP start-finish line.
And he has a lead of 1.45 seconds.
Not a huge gap, but comfortable at this point of time. Certainly there's no challenge coming out from the man that led the race in the early stages, and that's Mark Gibbs, the much quicker turbo Commodore. But we have a suspicion that his tyres are not wearing as perhaps they should be.
He's dropped back quite a bit from Fitzgerald now. He's having trouble at the moment with the back marker getting through, and in fact John Burke is now coming up behind him close again to try and take that third place away from him. He's got through those couple of back markers now.
And there's Burke just through the back marker. Another one, looks like a Mazda just in front of him.
And car 36, the Maztec Automotive RX-7 of Ian Green.
Successfully got past there, and now out chasing Peter Fitzgerald, the Yokohama Starion once again.
Coming up quickly behind the pair of them actually is Richard White in the White Glen Datsun entered Mitsubishi Starion, who started off in 11th place in the grid and has pulled his way up through the field, and in fact he's just about to lap that RX-7 that will be shortly on the tail of both Mark Gibbs and John Burke.
Certainly a car not to be sneezed at, because it finished in the top 3 in last year's race. Just toured consistently all day. Local Nissan dealer, Mike Lynn, driving with Richard White, and Mitsubishi Stereo.
Yes, the car that finished, as I said, second last year. Poor old Mark Lynn missed out because he broke his leg the week before and missed the drive. So this year he's hoping to be there himself.
Looking at that gap between Brock and Fitzgerald once again, it's certainly come down on the last half lap or so, with Fitzgerald coming up on the tail of Peter Brock as they go through Castrol Corner and onto the main straight once again. Here you can see the little advantage that Brock has in the V8 Commodore over the Mitsubishi Starion. The gap increases, but only for a short while, because the Starion is able to make up ground in the braking area and through the S's. Coming up to complete 29 of 150 laps. Brock crossing the start-finish line down into auto action corner. You can see that gap did increase on the last lap. They were nose to tail at the top end of the circuit and may well end up that way once again.
Yes, and behind them the 3 cars back in the 3rd, 4th and 5th were also nose to tail.
It's Fitzgerald and Brock, our race leaders, on lap 30, 150. That's 3rd, 4th and 5th, with Mark Gibbs leading John Burke, leading Kevin Bartlett. In 3rd, 4th and 5th, there's Burke having a little bit of a look at Penrite Corner that time. Not able to get on the inside. Correction, that's not Kevin Bartlett in 5th place, that's Richard White in the Mike Lynn car. He's come up past Bartlett, and is now in the top 5 and looking for position number 4 if he can possibly get past John Burke in the Toyota Supra. Back to our race leader. Almost a car in between he and Peter Fitzgerald that time, but Fitzgerald got around the outside as they came onto the STP start-finish straight.
Yes, and the gap is stationary about 1.4 seconds. It goes in and out fractionally with the traffic. That time Fitzy caught the short end of the stick by having to take that Commodore car 20 in the middle of the S's.
That was the Alan Springer to Commodore.
As Brock got him under brakes before the S's, Fitzy had to try and find a way around in the middle of the S's.
Fitzgerald's having quite a bit of trouble. He's come up behind the Organic Nursery Supplies Bob Stevens driven Commodore now. Got past there, car number 31. The wave from Fitzgerald. Sportsmanship.
Yes, it'll be a flop all afternoon for the faster cars, but I'm sure that Fitz will be quite happy to be where he is, because he's only a second or so behind Brock, and he knows that Brock's going to make 2 stops and he'll make 1. And with the manual wheel braces and ordinary jacks, it's a long process changing 4 tyres.
It's certainly none of your 6 or 7 seconds that we've seen on Grand Prix racing this year. It's probably in the order of around 2 minutes. You can stop to take on fuel and change 4 tyres.
It's not even like a 30-second Group A stop, as we saw at Bathurst.
There's the gap between 1st and 2nd, Peter Brock and Peter Fitzgerald. Brock in 05, the cars there with one of the slower markers just in front of him. Quickly gobbled up. Peter Fitzgerald has the Bob Nelson Arthur Latter Toyota Celica in between he and Brock. Not long, however. Brock just following the Suzuki's around. No doubt he'll be gobbled up and make it on the straighter section of the track. Up towards Castrol Corner now. See the difference between the V8 of Brock and the speed of the GTI Suzuki. Brock goes through, and at the end of the straight, Peter Fitzgerald won't be able to get past. He may have to wait for the next short straight, the STP start-finish straight. About 40 or 50 metres between Fitzgerald on our screen now and Peter Brock. Completing at 32. Brock goes down into auto action corner. Looks like the Henry Draper Lindsay Siebler Suzuki in between he and Peter Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald coming up behind that car now as they come into the Mike Lynn Nissan sweeper. see that these cars weren't all that much quicker in qualifying. In fact, the car that Fitzgerald is right behind now qualified in a time of 1:13.86 seconds against Peter Fitzgerald's 1:11.46, as Fitzgerald has an attempt around the outside of the left-hander, heading up towards Castrol Corner, and finally gets through.
That's the real problem that Fitz has got, that even the Suzukis really are quick, or as quick as the Starions around the bends. But it's down, only that place they're quicker, the Starions, is down the straight. Rocky got him down the straight, but in fact Fitzy had to follow virtually the whole lap before he could get past himself, because he couldn't take him through the corners, because the Suzuki was almost as quick through the corners as he was.
Peter Brock completing 32-33 laps as the buffer, as we can see on our screen, about 50 or 60 metres between he and Brock, and between he and Fitzgerald, and a reasonably clear track ahead of them, with only one Suzuki to contend with, probably in the next 2 or 3 laps.
Behind them, still in third place, is the Commodore Turbo of Mark Gibbs. In fourth now is Richard White in the Starion, and in fifth place we have John Burke in the Toyota Supra. In sixth place we have car 57, which is Kent Newton in the Commodore. Seventh now is Kevin Butler, who's dropped back quite a way in the Starion. Eighth place car number 2, which is Brad Jones in the Perrier-sponsored Starion, and ninth place 88, which is Ian Luff in the Starion, and in 10th place car number 3, which is the Leo Gagan entered car for Tony Scott.
As Brock goes past car 71, the Charlie Anderson Suzuki, back to third and fourth, which is Mark Gibbs and Richard White in the Nissan car. Back to our race leader. There's the gap between Fitzgerald in second place in the black and red Starion, the Yokohama sponsored car, and Peter Brock in 05 for Mobile and Tongass Racing. That's third and fourth.
Richard White is now through to third place, which is a particularly good drive, because they can start back on the 11th place in the grid, the 6th row of the grid. So he's done well to come through the traffic and get his way up to the third place.
Brock very smooth through the twisty parts of the circuit in typical fashion. Looks always very, very laid back behind the wheel, but obviously very, very professional. As we said earlier, celebrating just over 20 years of motor racing and the end of an era for Brock and Holden. The second place man, Peter Fitzgerald, in arrears by 1.19 seconds, so the gap has come down marginally from 1.5 to 1.19 seconds, with a gap second to third of about 6 seconds. Peter Fitzgerald in second place. There's Richard White, 6.3 seconds back from Peter Fitzgerald in third place. Fourth, Mark Gibbs, the only second and a half in arrears of Richard White in third. White goes past the Charlie Anderson Suzuki. That car may have been lapped twice already by our race leaders. Nissan car, at the moment driven by Richard White. Brock down the main straight once again. The gap between he and Peter Fitzgerald is somewhat less this time round. Fitzgerald's made up quite a bit of ground on the last lap, heading through the S's and up towards the start-finish line. Looking at that gap, is down to 0.77 of a second. So Fitzgerald, as you can see noticeably, has diminished the gap between he and Brock. Maybe Fitzgerald has decided this is the time, with 36 laps behind them, to throw out a challenge.
Not only do we have a battle between Holden and Mitsubishi for the first and second places, we also have a tyre war going on because of the drop cars on Bridgestones, and of course the Fitzgerald car is now challenging Brock for the lead is on Yokohama's, and this is the closest that Fitzgerald has been all race, on lap 37 of 150, probably halfway or so through the stint that Brock is going to do, so his tyres should be going off slightly, but his fuel load has come down, and the car should be nicely balanced. But Fitzgerald will be going further in the race on his this set of tyres and this load of fuel. Will probably go through to lap 90 or so before he considers stopping. He's very, very close behind Brock and will certainly throw in a challenge this next lap or so.
Fitzgerald now right on the heels of Peter Brock as they complete lap 37. There's Fitzgerald's teammate Alan Grice, another Yokohama team driver, will be taking over the car at around lap 90 as Nigel tells us. But there's our race leaders with Peter Fitzgerald putting a lot of pressure on Peter Brock now as they head into the sweeper. There's only a car length in it. Brock opens up that gap marginally as they go through the sweeper, taking a slightly different line to Fitzgerald, with Fitzgerald's inside line worked. Fitzgerald having a little bit of a look on the inside as they head in towards Penrite corner, swaps over to the outside, not able to get through. Brock can see nothing but black and red in his rear vision mirror at this point of time, with a lot of pressure now coming from Peter Fitzgerald. The left-hander heading up towards Castrol corner and onto the main straight. They've got a reasonably clear track down the straight, maybe one or two cars, but no, I don't think they'll catch them down the straight this time round. As you can see, the power of the V8 Commodore and Peter Brock greater than that of the Mitsubishi Starion of Peter Fitzgerald. The gap opens as they come down the main Dunlop straight, then into the Ollie's Trolleys corner once again. Through the S's, Fitzgerald catches him. The gap now down to one and a half car length as they complete lap 38.
Fitzgerald is going to find the problem now is that the Commodore is quicker down the straights than he is, and Brock knows how to protect the lead. There are two obvious passing spots on this circuit, one at the end of the main straight and one at the end of the pit straight, and Brock knows as long as he protects those particular spots that Fitz is going to find it very hard to find a way around him. And as long as he's neat and smooth and stays on line, Fitz has got a problem. But it's the age-old problem that's coming up now for Brock, especially as being the first man through, is that they'll come up front and back markers, and that's where the problem could be. And Fitz is still trying, but as you can see, he's got to try from the wrong side of the track every time.
This, of course, is how Peter Brock got into the lead a few laps ago. They came up behind some slower cars, and they're coming up behind the Gavin James David Morton Commodore. There it is in our picture now, and this may just be a way for Peter Fitzgerald to get through. Brock opens up the gap just marginally as they come down the main straight once again. Be looking for them to get past that yellow Commodore of Gavin James as they come around through the S's and onto the start-finish straight once again. Fitzgerald taking an inside running, but Brock looks like he's taking the inside and gets through. Fitzgerald goes from the outside to the inside. He also gets through, keeps the pressure on Peter Brock as they head up towards the Bank Insurance corner and onto the short Yokohama straight. Nose to tail, the two cars, our two race leaders, Peter Brock in 05 and Peter Fitzgerald in car number 1. Around the sweeper again.
Well, that situation there with Gavin James was good as much as he saw the leaders coming and moved out of the way. The problem is coming up with a couple of cars who are dicing. They've got their own race and dice going on. They won't see the leaders so easily. And they say Brock has been the man in front, is the one who, and every time so far it's been the leader who's suffered when the back markers had his own little race and not realised they were coming.
As we said, that's how Brock got through the lead. Let's see what happens when they come up behind two of the slower Commodores as they come down the main straight once again. Rocky opens up that gap. He certainly has the power down the straight, but Fitzgerald has the brakeability and closes the gap under brakes at Ollie's corner and again through the S's. Car 10 is the one they're coming up behind. That's the Bathurst Lane Car Club entry of David Brearley. It's only about 15 metres to go before Brock will be on his tail and looking for a way to get past.
What this dice lead is doing, in fact, is slowing them down. Richard White in third place has now got the gap down from 6.5 seconds down to 3.5 seconds. He's catching the leaders because Brock is driving defensively.
It's the Mark Gibbs Michael Preston car, the Commodore Turbo, our earlier race leader, into the pits.
That'd be cooler.
There's our race leaders once again coming up behind a couple of the slower Commodores, with first of whom waves them past and moves right over to the left-hand side of the Michael Nissan sweeper. Allows second place man Peter Fitzgerald to get through also, but not really in the right place. He didn't see Fitzgerald coming perhaps, but no, he didn't, and it's car 39 Hugh Grieve, who had to go very, very wide as Peter Fitzgerald clipped the inside dirt, and Hughie Grieve had himself a little bit of a spin. So
well, he had a spin actually just a half a lap or so ago at the S's. That's the second one in a lap, and that was mainly caused because he didn't let Fitzgerald through. Fitzy was going through.
So Hugh Grieve and Charlie Milner in their Commodore having problems. As we watch second place man, there's first place man Peter Brock. 1 or 2 car lengths between he and Peter Fitzgerald. This is the battle for the lead as they come around to complete 42 of 150 laps in the Yokohama Winton 300.
And just 2.9 seconds now back from Brock to third place man Richard White, and they've got a real battle in front of them, Brock, to get through these back markers now.
Richard White, a very experienced punter around the Winton circuit. We're used to seeing him in road registered cars, and there he goes on the inside of one of the slower Commodores. That's the light car, the Lithgow District Car Club entry of Stephen Evans and Greg Zink. Running for Mike Lynn Motors, the local vanilla Nissan dealer. Richard White has made the transgression from road registered vehicles, which are somewhat older and somewhat slower, and performed exceptionally well in last year's Yokohama Winton 300. As we go back to our race leaders, Peter Brock and Peter Fitzgerald through some of the slower Commodores, but still 1 or 2 to go. Brock right on the tail now, on the back marker.
Mr. John Mott's Bob Jolly Commodore. The problem with there is it's quite a quick car. It's a turbo Commodore, and so obviously down the straight it was very hard for even Brock to catch him. And Fitz is stuck with him, and Richard White is getting closer every lap.
There's the gap. We couldn't even call it a gap now between our race leaders, Peter Brock and Peter Fitzgerald. It's not the sort of gap that we can tell you at time, because we're now measuring it in inches virtually.
So we're back to Richard White in third place. He's now 1.8 seconds from Brock.
Fitzgerald up on the outside of Brock at the top end of the circuit. Couldn't find his way around then. Gave it a real good try though, and now trying for an inside running. Just sitting hot on the rear bumper bar of Brock, following him around onto the main straight once again. Brock has yet another of the slower Commodores to contend with, and it could be in a very dangerous position this time, because it'll be right at the end of the main straight in the braking area. The car remains just ahead of him. Brock and Fitzgerald coming down to complete lap 44 of 150. 44 completed.
And Richard White now is virtually on the tail of Fitzgerald.
There's the leader, Peter Brock. There's the black and red car of Peter Fitzgerald. And there's third place man, Richard White, in the Mike Lynn Nissan car. He's come up 6.3 seconds down to come virtually on the tail of second place man, Peter Fitzgerald. As we were saying before, a commendable drive in last year's Winton 300, and showing that he can do it once again. There's Fitzgerald putting the pressure on Brock, following him nose to tail, coming so close to giving him a little bit of a nudge, but both of these drivers very professional, and I'm sure if there was a nudge it would be totally accidental. Down the main straight they come once again. There's the gap between second and third. Peter Fitzgerald and Richard White. Race leader, Peter Brock. Peter Fitzgerald, Richard White, 1, 2, 3, as they come through the S's and come around to complete lap 44. Up the small hill and across the STP start-finish line. 44 completed for our 3 race leaders, which only have about 1 car length between each of them.
Fourth place man is still John Burke in the Supra, but he's now the length of the top straight behind the first 3 cars. In 5th place now we still have Kevin Bartlett, 6th Ken Newton, and in in 7th place is the Perrier Darren of Brad Jones, which you'll share with Neil Crompton.
How long can these two keep at it, nose to tail? Peter Fitzgerald, and look how close Richard White has got now. That's our 3 race leaders, nose to tail as they head around the top end of the circuit.
And there is a veritable traffic jam in front of them. They are going to come across virtually half the field in the next few laps. They're starting to catch the midfield runners now. They've lapped the slow cars, and they're now catching the men who are in probably 10th through to 20th. And they are not that much slower. They've gone 45 laps before they've lapped them, so in a 1 minute 20 or 1 minute 10 second lap, it only puts them a second or so a lap slower. And they're going to be finding it very hard to get through this track.
And what's in front of them looks like Swanson Street in peak hour. A lot of traffic to get through. The first being the Mark Morgan-Jones Melrose car. Number 15 is immediately in front of Brock as they head out down the Yokohama straight, just a short straight before we go into that winding sweeper. Brock right on the tail of Morgan-Jones. Seems to have been down this road once before. Brock's through, Fitzgerald through, Richard White's balked.
He's stuck because there's a yellow flag down there, which means he can't overtake, so he has to stay behind the slower car who was in front of him.
Bit of a nudge there, Fitzgerald under brakes, but it didn't upset Brock's line at all.
I think probably Brock slowed slightly more than Fitzy imagined, but he expected him to because of the yellow flag.
They come out onto the straight once again. Brock pulls away with that extra power of the V8 with his Commodore. The 2 Starions remain about the same distance from each other right down the straight and into the braking area. And have a look at that traffic ahead of Brock. Fitzgerald goes around the outside and Brock pulls into the pits. Brock, our race leader, is into the pits. This, I don't believe, is a scheduled pit stop. Mechanics under the bonnet, the jacks go under the car. Looks like Philip Brock may be taking over the drive from brother Peter.
It probably is just about imagined now, because allowing for warm-up laps and so on, he's done 46 laps, which gives 2 stops, gives you 150. I would say he was just about ready for it now. Phil Brock out again now.
Once again, it was the Morgan-Jones Commodore that seems to be getting in the way of the Brocks all day, but they had to push the car back to get around Morgan-Jones Commodore. But Philip Brock now out on the track.
The leader still is, now we have, of course, Fitzgerald leading now. We're very close behind him, the Mike Glynn Datsun Starion Mitsubishi of Richard White, who's had a tremendous drive. I really think he's been the driver of the day so far. He's come up from a low position, he's caught the leaders, and now we see whether he can in fact take the lead.
That's Richard White in 2nd place. John Burke, and our race leader Peter Fitzgerald, the Suzuki in between he and Richard White now.
Because it may just be that Fitzy can go faster now, he's not following the Commodore. It's often the case you can go faster in the car in front of you, but you can't pass him, and it looks at this stage anyway, though now he's got a clear track in terms of no faster cars there. He appears to be pulling away slightly from Richard White, although there's this traffic around him anyway, which is causing problems.
Fitzgerald coming up behind the Tony Gregg, Peter Mackay Starion, trying to find a way through there. Interesting group of cars, the Kevin Bartlett, Peter Mackay, Tony Gregg combo. Kevin Bartlett scheduled to run the first half of the race in one of the cars and the second half in their second car. That's car number 6 that our race leader Peter Fitzgerald is coming up behind now, and I would suggest that is the car currently being driven by Tony Gregg. goes from one side to the other. Tony's not only a big boy to get around, Peter Fitzgerald's finding the car very big to get around. Trying on the left-hander, swaps over to the outside for the right-hander, and takes him. Oh, and coming together, and Fitzgerald's nudged Tony Greig. Tony Greig's gone around a complete 180. Quite a bit of panel damage to our race leader, the front of our race leader's car, and it looked like that Peter Fitzgerald was getting totally frustrated with Tony Greig, not getting out of his way. Tried one side of the track, tried the other side of the track. Finally, when he came to come past him on the inside, just clipped the right-hand side of Tony Greig's car, and you can see the damage there on our race leader, Peter Fitzgerald's Starion, after that coming together with the Starion of Tony Greig.
I would not be surprised if Fitzgerald gets the black flag for that car. I would think the stewards will look very close in the front of it to see whether that bumper might fall off. But I always thought that Tony Greig was a fast bowler, not a spinner.
Well, he's certainly a spinner now, here at the Winton Raceway. Just having a closer look at the front of Peter Fitzgerald's car as it went past our vantage point. It looks as though that front bumper bar is reasonably secure. It's not flapping around in the wind, so I would say that Peter Fitzgerald would be allowed to stay out on the track, albeit with a damaged front end. But have a look at young Richard White, right on the heels now, looking for an inside running there at Penrite Corner, and looking for a race lead. You imagine the locals from Benalla if their local car was able to beat the Group E champion.
Now the Yokohama team of Fitzgerald were planning to go to about 90 with one stop. If there's a problem there, they're getting to the stage where they could do they've done 50 laps now. Another few laps and they'll be up to 60, which gives us a 90 lap stint for the second half of the race. So if there is a problem, they could bring the car in early and change over and let the second stint be the long one rather than the first stint. Peter Brock, who's after his pit stop has dropped back to 14th spot, but of course he'll start getting some of those places back when the other cars start making their pit stops.
That's the gap between first and second, Peter Fitzgerald and Richard White. Fitzgerald with the bent nose after they're coming together with Tony Greig, a similar Starion. So the smoothness of Peter Fitzgerald's driving, easing the car around the corners, knowing that he's in the lead, putting under a little bit of pressure, but not all that much, from Richard White. Race leader now up behind Alan Springett, one of the slower Commodores. Springett moves over, does the right thing, and allows Fitzgerald through, and allows Richard White through. As our race leaders come once again onto the main straight. There's another view of that bent front end of Peter Fitzgerald as we have a replay of the spinning Tony Greig. A little bit of a nudge there from Peter Fitzgerald's car as Tony Greig not only spins and goes into the tyre wall, a double strengthened tyre wall at Penrite Corner, because so many cars over the years have collected that concrete tank which supports the flag marshals. So they've put an extra layer of tyre walls around there. So I wouldn't think that Tony Greig's car was all that bent.
But it comes back again to the same problem. The back markers must be aware of faster cars coming through.
Greg East and Pat Hogben, their Commodore, down in pit lane. Pat Hogben was the driver of the first stint. We can't quite see whether they're changed over or not. And there's the in excess entered car of David Clement and David Jones, out of a 28, the Suzuki GTI.
Pit lane's getting pretty crowded because car 71's also there, the GTI Suzuki of John Wright and Charlie Anderson, and behind them is car 20, the Alan Springett Neil Beers Commodore as well.
I'm sure it'll get a lot busier as the race goes on, especially seeing that we've got so many Commodores. In fact, 18 Commodores started in the race, and they'll be looking for 2 pit stops. That's car 71, the John Wright Charlie Anderson car, as we go back to our race leader Peter Fitzgerald, being followed by second place man Richard White. As Tom Gordon joins us in the commentary point. Some interesting racing thus far, Tom.
Oh, marvellous racing, Ian. The Yokohama Winton 300 is doing it for us again. Every year has produced a crackerjack race, and this one is probably the best that I've seen so far. I've been doing on-course commentary for the first 50 laps, and it's been very exciting stuff.
Yes, it certainly has. Very, very close racing for most of the first 1/3 of the race, because we're just over the 50-lap mark now. 150 laps in total we're looking at. Most of the first third, there were the first 4 or 5 cars virtually nose to tail. As we can see, nose to tail here, our race leaders, Peter Fitzgerald and Richard White. Philip Brock in 05 now after the first pit stop, and that car lying back in 14th place after their pit stop.
Yes, Ian, they lost about a lap and a half, according to our computer here.
As we go back and see the gap between Peter Fitzgerald and Richard White once again in 2 similar Mitsubishi Starions, covered there by the chopper.
I must say, Ian, that I've been very impressed with the drive by Richard White. This has been a most extraordinary drive, starting from 11th place on the grid, coming up to now 2nd, and really harrowing the leader. Really the drive of the day so far.
That's quite amazing, because that's exactly what Nigel Greenway said about 5 minutes ago. So we have a total consensus of opinion, and I would have to go along with that. Richard White, we've mentioned, was a road registered car in an older Mazda. We've seen him campaign here at Winton and right around Australia on many, many occasions. It locks up and brake completely. We see the wheels stop.
Yes, a great shot by the cameraman. Our compliments to the cameraman on that one. That was a really great picture.
And a really great drive from Richard White, passing another one of the slower cars. He's just continually sitting on the tail of Peter Fitzgerald, not really throwing out a challenge, although he has done so on 1 or 2 occasions. As we can see, the gap has opened up a little bit more now because of some of the traffic that they had to weave their way through. Fitzgerald obviously got the advantage, and Richard White got walked, but only marginally.
Yes, around Winton, traffic is all important, Ian. If you get the run through the traffic, it makes all the difference. We've seen several times so far in this race where the lead has changed, high places have changed, purely because the cars are momentarily balked, they lose their pace, and someone behind gets a better run, and away he goes.
That looks like the Youlden brothers car in between the 2 of them now.
Yes, that car was in the pits before, Ian. It was running in about 5th place. It's dropped back now to 10th with that pit stop, and of course is now 1 lap behind the leader.
The brothers Youlden, we've seen in sports sedans, really the first time last year we saw them in a Group B series production car, but up in the top 10, and I'm sure that's where we'll see them if they can continue on at this particular rate. Back at 15 at the moment, but as Tom said, because of the pit stop, but I'm sure they're capable of climbing back up. The Youlden brothers car still in between our 2 race leaders, Peter Fitzgerald, and on screen Richard White in the Mike Lind Nissan car.
It's the leading 2. In actual fact, that's Youlden, of course, behind the leader on the road, but 1 lap down. That's our leader, Peter Fitzgerald, still without a pit stop. We have seen some of the leading cars in for pit stops already, particularly the Commodore. Here's Kent Youlden. And of course the cars, both the Youlden cars during the year, always beautifully presented. The 2 brothers are, of course, panel beaters. They take great pride in presenting their cars. Peter Fitzgerald usually takes great pride in his car too, but he would be a bit upset if he could see a picture of the front of his car very much deranged after that incident with Tony Gregg, which I would have to say was really caused by Tony Gregg. Convention is that if you're being lapped by the leader, you do get out of the way, and Tony, I must say, didn't on that occasion, and Peter Fitzgerald rather forcefully took his right away.
As you can see the frustration in our close-up shots. He just was trying that inside running at Penrite corner and had to force his way through and caused the spin of Tony Gregg. That's the
clear hand car. That car running currently in 8th place. which is quite a good result for Chris Clearahan.
There goes Richard White past the Youlden brothers car.
It's only because Youlden himself was balked by a slower car, and still actually Richard White hasn't got through, but he will now as they come out through Castrol and down the straight, and Youlden will also dispatch that left car.
It's the Bob Jolly car. So Kit Youlden sticks pretty closely there to the second place man.
Well, of course, Youlden was running in 5th place, Ian, before his pit stop, so certainly one of the front runners. So he should be able to match pace fairly much with the Mike Glynn car, currently driven by Richard White.
A race leader, Peter Fitzgerald, with the bent nose, but still doing it quite comfortably. There's the gap between first and second. The third of the cars on your screen is second place man, Richard White.
Good shot showing Richard White going round the sweeper, around the Mike Glynn Nissan sweeper, the same name of course as the owner of this car and the co-driver. Mike Glynn will be taking over for the second stint in the Starion.
So we might just explain that some people might think that we're calling this a Nissan, but Mike Glynn is the local Nissan dealer here in Benalla, which is close to the Winton circuit, but he chose to race a quicker Mitsubishi product Starion for the Winton 300 and several other races through the year.
There's our leader once again, Peter Fitzgerald, and Peter would be very happy to be in this position, not just because he's in the lead, but because he is only expecting to do one pit stop in, and to be even in the front 3 cars at this point of the race, with only knowing that you only have one pit stop and some of your opponents are going to have 2, would give you a very confident feeling at this stage.
I'm sure Ray Altus and the people from Yokohama would also be very happy seeing their car in the lead and seeing they're sponsoring the Yokohama Winton 300. It'd be a nice double for them if Fitzy was able to bring it home. Of course, Fitzgerald we've spoken a lot about, but he's got a very, very formidable co-driver, another Yokohama driver in Alan Rice, to take over the car on around about lap 90. So neither of them a slouch behind the wheel. A very good pairing, 2 Yokohama drivers. I'm sure they just keep that car going, keep it in that position, it'll be a very happy result. There's our second place man, Richard White. A couple of cars. John Wright, Charlie Anderson, car number 71 seems to be popping up every few seconds with cars lapping him. One of the slower Suzukis.
Yes, because some of the Suzukis have been quite quick today, Ian. The leading Suzuki is up to 19th place. That's car number 40, Lou Renato car, which is a very, very commendable effort. So some of the Suzukis are putting in a really good effort. Back to the leader, and Peter Fitzgerald coming round on his 59th lap. Coming round to complete lap 60. And you can see a gap back to, yes, there's Kevin Bartlett. He's in 3rd place with 77, the Supra of John Burke right behind him. So that's the position they are on the road.
Quite a back in the 3rd and 4th.
And the car behind them will be the Perrier car, but he's back a bit distance. These two are very, very close together. Back to our leader, Peter Fitzgerald. And I must say, Ian, that last night the pairing of Grice and Fitzgerald were, I was going to say quietly confident, but they weren't even quiet. They were very confident.
I don't blame them. They've got good tyres, they've got good equipment, and 2 very experienced drivers. Talking about experience, a man that's been around the Winton circuit many, many times, Richard White in car number 8. Not necessarily in this car, quite a slower machinery, but boy, he's shown his expertise both in last year's race and again here today.
This gives us an idea of the distance between them. There they are. And back to 3rd place would be number 9. Here he comes round the corner now, following the RX-7. And the Supra right behind him, John Burke in 77. So that's our leading 4 cars at present. A bit of a gap between second and third, but the other two are certainly together in two pairs, as it were. Our leading car here, Peter Fitzgerald, and the car that's throwing out a challenge to him, the Mike Glynn car with Richard White at the wheel. Those two are together, and then third and fourth are together.
Looking at the computer screen, Philip Rock in 05 has picked up position 14 to position 10 since he's rejoined the race after the driver changed from Peter to Philip Rock and taking on fuel. So Philip Rock climbing up through the field once again, up to position 10 as we watch Richard White, Mike Glynn car, and there's our race leader. Not a huge gap between he and Richard White. Looking for our third place man, Kevin Bartlett. There he comes, the Mitsubishi Ralliart car. And there's fourth place man, John Burke, race leader. Coming around the sweeper. There's a shot of the very large crowd here that has come to be expected for the running of the Yokohama Winton 300 each year. Cars packed right around the circuit, and a huge crowd in the main spectator area.
Cars on their 63rd lap, 63 out of 150 laps. 150 laps gives us our 300-kilometre distance for the Yokohama Winton 300. As the name suggests, as our leading car, Peter Fitzgerald, comes up over the rise, over the start-finish line for the 63rd time, and he holds a little margin over car number 8. There is the gap, probably about half a dozen car lengths. Richard White, over the last few laps, seems to be prepared to just hold that distance, more or less static. Not pushing either himself or the car, and for that matter not really pushing the leader either, as they reel these laps off.
Passing there the Bob Nelson Arthur Latter Toyota Celica, both of our race leaders through successfully. No, second place man Richard White is not through successfully, but there he goes past the Toyota Celica of Bob Nelson and Arthur Latter. Our race leader down the main straight once again on lap 65 into the braking area at Ollie's Trolley's corner. There's the gap between first and second. Richard White in second. Two similar cars, obviously similarly prepared, and both drivers looking at only one pit stop in the 150 lap race. There's the gap between first and second as they go round Auto Action corner. Up towards that famous, quite difficult Mike Glynn Nissan sweeper. See Fitzgerald working away at the wheel as he goes through the sweeper.
He's coming up to close up on car 11 too, and that's one of the leading cars, of course. Was originally driven when the race started by Mark Gibbs, now being driven by Mike Preston rather, and that car dropped from third place when it went into the pits. It dropped right back to about 24th place. Well, now it's up to 11th, right behind the Phil Brock car here. Just looking at the computer screen.
So there's the Mark Gibbs, Michael Preston car with our race leader coming up behind him. Michael Preston in car number 11 with the headlights shining in position number 11. Some while before Peter Fitzgerald is able to get past this car, because we remember back it was the car that started from pole position, and it was the early race leader, the Turbo Commodore, Michael Preston and Mark Gibbs. On screen now, that's the car in position number 11 that our race leader Peter Fitzgerald has to pass.
Yes, although it is a different driver this time, Ian, so maybe Mike Preston may be more inclined to let Peter Fitzgerald through, because of course he will be lapped, and that's a bit different from battling it out for the lead as they were originally in the early laps of this race.
There he goes past Michael Preston, both of our race leaders through, coming up on another the slower Commodores. Quite a gaggle of traffic in front of Fitzgerald and Richard White at the moment. See the traffic that they have to fight their way through, and this may be just an opportunity of Fitzgerald gets balked behind one of the cars for Richard White to slip through. He's certainly positioned himself very nicely if that event does occur. Right on the tail of Fitzgerald as they go through auto action once again, heading up towards Nellank Insurance Corner.
He certainly couldn't position himself any closer at the moment.
Car 27's the next one they've got to contend with. That's the Andrew Mackay Suzuki. They go around him on the inside of the sweeper. Then they've got a clear track for about 50 metres and two more Commodores to contend with. We're up on the tail of them as they head towards Castrol Corner. There you can see the gap between first and second, Peter Fitzgerald and Richard White. Mitsubishi Starions, one for Yokohama tyres and the other one for Mike Lynn Motors.
And again, that hesitation of that inside front wheel, Ian, as Richard White applied the brakes with not much weight on that front wheel at the time, and the wheel stopped again. Superb camera work. Gives you a very good insight into what sort of mechanics is going on with these racing cars. They come past our commentary point once again to complete lap 68, sorry. Lap 68 down.
Fitzgerald now up behind the Alan Springer Neil Byers Commodore. Gets through there, kind of a 20.
Pushes him a little wide too.
White gets through just before they head on to the sweeper.
And you can see how car 11 has stayed up behind them. And there's, of course, Alan Grice taking it nice and comfortably in this delightful Benalla sunshine, sitting waiting to take over the drive with Peter Fitzgerald, watching quietly how Peter and how the race is going in general, really, but watching how the car is performing, that he'll have to slip into the driving seat when they make their pit stop, which we imagine will be around about lap 75 to 80.
Expert did suggest around about 90, but it's a waiting game because obviously the teams were not telling us and not telling anybody of their tactics prior to the race.
Quite a bit of gamesmanship goes on in this regard, Ian, because of course there is a difference in the amount of pit stops that some of these cars will have to have, and you really don't want to be giving away all your plans to your opposition, because gamesmanship does enter into it to a certain extent.
That's first and second, Peter Fitzgerald and Richard White, virtually nose to tail. Moving back to third and fourth.
Should be Kevin Bartlett, according to the screen. Has Kevin snuck up? Kevin Bartlett has indeed snuck up ahead of the Supra. We can see him there. Yes, there he is. Well, not that one. That's, of course, car 49, the Bob Nelson car. But just tucked in behind him was the Supra of John Burke. There's KB. Kevin Bartlett in the Bridgestone Modern Motor entry. One of two cars in that team entered. The other one, of course, driven by Tony Gregg.
Race leader Peter Fitzgerald. Second place, Richard White. One and a half car lengths between these two as they head up the small rise onto pit straight and across the start-finish line, completing 69 of 150 laps in the 1987 Yokohama Winton 300. There you can see the gap between first and second, absolutely negligible. Car number 10, one of the slower Commodores, the Bathurst Light Car Club entry of Peter Dolman and David Brearley. There's Richard White at the top end of the track, a very tight Penrite corner. Just, he's quite satisfied to sit behind and maybe grab an opportunity if one comes up in heavier traffic. That was a little bit close.
Yes, I think Peter Fitzgerald stopped a little quicker than Richard White expected there, and That was very almost a nose to tailor.
The end of the main straight. Our race leaders, Peter Fitzgerald.
And over the line once again to complete
70 of 150.
70. And certainly Richard White is just hanging on with great determination behind the leader.
Peter Brock back in the pits. Philip Brock, we should say, back in the pits. Fuel going in, car being jacked up. The car currently lying in 10th, our early race leader.
Pace.
With no apparent action on the car. There was a bit of a chat between Peter and Philip as we join our race leader once again on pit straight. Passing Philip Brock, who's just rejoined the race. Bit of a mystery there for 05, the Mobile Tonkrus racing car of Philip and Peter Brock. As I say, there was no apparent work done on the car. It was jacked up, a chat between the two brothers, and the car put down as Richard White tries to go round Philip Brock on the outside and on the inside. Or a little bit of a touch there. I don't think so, but it came very, very close as Philip Brock forced Richard White to go right onto the inside of the track through the dust. The right-hander at the top end of the track. Race leader.
Right up behind the Perrier car of Brad Jones, which has been in the pits too, because he's dropped back to 9th on the computer listings, Ian. Brad Jones was up in 4th and 5th place. Not together, of course.
Brad Jones, of course, has been doing some international racing and will be doing more in season 1988. Peter Fitzgerald waves at Brad for allowing him through. And here comes Richard White. Let him through.
Wave to him for letting him through because he wasn't allowed through. Brad Jones racking across in front of Richard White's similar stallion.
Brad Jones in position number 9 at the moment, in between our two race leaders, Peter Fitzgerald and Richard White, and giving nothing away. It moves over now for Richard White to go through in second position.
It's quite amazing. Richard White didn't lose very much at all there to the leader, even though he was walked for quite a little while by Brad Jones.
That is our leader, Peter Fitzgerald. Coming up to complete lap 73, and within the next probably dozen or so laps we'll see Fitzgerald come in and hand the car over to Alan Grice, his co-driver.
Yes, with rapidly approaching halfway distance, 72 laps. They're on their 73rd. They've just completed their 73rd.
That's first and second, Peter Fitzgerald and Richard White, nose to tail. Now looking for third place.
Number 9.
Kevin Bartlett.
Quite a good way back at the present time. Still not around that section of the track.
There he comes, Kevin Bartlett in number 9. In third place.
Kent Youlden right behind him, but of course Kent has been into the pits and he is currently in 10th place. Was in 5th, I think, was the highest that Kent got up to.
Back to the race leaders down the Dunlop main straight here at the Winton circuit. 2.03 kilometres of bitumen, 150 laps in the Yokohama Winton 300, with Peter Fitzgerald and Richard White nose to tail in the lead and coming up to the halfway mark.
This is a good shot on Richard White in the Mike Glynn Motors car, entry number 8, Starion, and certainly one of the best performances of the race so far, this drive by Richard White.
starting, of course, from position number 11 on the 6th row of the grid. He's fought his way up in the first third of the race, in the first 40 or 50 laps. Has been on the tail of our race leader now for 10 or 12 laps.
This is the 75th lap, so in other words, when we finish this one, we will have completed half distance. And it may be appropriate to just quickly flip down the first few places, Ian, to give the viewers a bit of an idea of where they stand at the moment. The leading ones anyway. Car number 1, of course, on the screen at the present time. Peter Fitzgerald in the Stallion. He leads from Richard White in car number 8. Then we've got Kevin Bartlett in car number 9 is in third, and he is followed by 77. That's John Burke in the Toyota Supra. Then we've got car 88. That's the Stallion of Ian Luff from Sydney. Then car number 4. That's Chris Clearahan from Canberra in his Stallion. Car number 6 is the second of the Bridgestone modern motor cars driven by Tony Gregg. Then car 2, and that's the Perrier Racing Team Bradley Jones entry. And car 11 is the Durant Food Services Michael Preston at the wheel of the Commodore Turbo. And the 10th place is currently being held by the Youlden Brothers car, the Commodore, driven by Kent Youlden.
A race leader coming up behind the Caltex AFM. David James, Peter McLeod. Peter McLeod being invited into a race in this car today. Peter McLeod of Bathurst fame. This car racing in the Caltex AFM Automotive Fleet Maintenance colours. The new sponsor to the sport.
Peter McLeod, of course, one of the co-winners of Bathurst in 1987.
Taking over the wheel in the second half of the race with David James currently behind the wheel. Currently behind the wheel of that car is Peter Fitzgerald. Not for very long, however, because we expect him into the pits in the next few laps to hand over the car to Alan Bryce, his co-driver, as Fitz goes past the Caltex car driven by David James.
Just passing the Cullen father and son team of Glenn Cullen and Warren Cullen. Was quite interesting to see their pit stop in because they had to change tyres, put fuel in, and also put a P plate on because Glenn is a young driver still on his provisional plates. Provisional not in the sense of on road, of course, but on track. And that's the super salvage car we just saw the rear of as Richard White came up to lap him once again.
That's our race leader, Peter Fitzgerald, 1985 winner of the Yokohama Winton 300, and also the champion of Group E Series Production Racing for 1987.
Familiar place in good Group E racing for Peter Fitzgerald, that of being race leader.
Richard White having a little bit of trouble getting past the super salvage car of Warren and Glenn Cullen, but now successfully passed. One other car in between he and Peter Fitzgerald. Will be coming up to very shortly.
Yes, Peter would be quite thankful of that little cushion he's got over a second place car. Just takes a bit of the pressure off. And of course, Richard White has seemed to be quite easily be able to pick up this distance. Now back to the pits, and here we've got the John Burke car, number 77, the Toyota Supra, in the pits.
That's currently lying in fourth place, and the sixth place car has been in and out also. That's the Ian Luff Stallion. He's been in and just gone out. But that's the Toyota Supra, currently lying fourth, was right up there in the first 2 or 3 in the early place, but a standard stop for the Toyota Supra of John Burke and Drew Price. Race leader, who hasn't been in the pits yet, Peter Fitzgerald, coming up behind the Rocky Canto Clyde Lee Suzuki GTI. Certainly continual traffic for our race leaders and the faster cars to get past. There's second place man Richard White coming up on the same Suzuki, which at the moment splits first and second.
There's hardly a respite here for the leading drivers at Winton. They've always got someone to go past as Peter Fitzgerald rounds the top section of the circuit. So we've got Kent Youlden in the pits again. I think there probably would be changing driver. Yes, they are changing driver, so that means that brother Brett will be taking over. That's their second stop, and this will drop them down from their 9th place back some distance, because I think not only is it a driver change, are they changing tyres? No, it don't appear to be.
So
just
a very
fuel,
colourful
and it's